The rain doesn't stop in Miryang City when you need it to. It floods the alleys. It hammers the glass towers. It turns the streets into rivers that swallow whole nights without ever offering anything back. And on the 7th night of September, while the rest of the city slept or pretended to, the rain fell hardest on Hwanseong Spire, a glass monolith that cut through the skyline like a blade made of money and secrets. Inside, on the 43rd floor, 7 people hadn't slept in days. Their eyes burned. Their hands shook. Their clothes smelled like failure and stale coffee and something darker, the kind of fear that settles into your bones when you realize the clock isn't just ticking. It's counting down to something final. In the center of the room sat a vault. Black, seamless, silent. It had been there for 7 days, and for 7 days it had refused to open. Not for algorithms, not for brute force, not for the combined expertise of the country's best cryptographers, engineers, and security specialists. They had tried thermal imaging, quantum decryption, electromagnetic pulses, sound frequency mapping, magnetic resonance scanning, neural network prediction models, every tool in the modern arsenal. Nothing worked. Every time they thought they found a pattern, the vault changed. It adapted, like it was learning, like it was alive. And tonight was the last night they had. One man stood near the window, watching the rain distort the city lights below. Kang Jae-rin, 41 years old, sharp jawline, silver-rimmed glasses that caught the fluorescent light at angles that made his eyes hard to read, a suit that cost more than most people earned in 6 months, custom-tailored, Italian fabric, the kind of detail that separates people who have money from people who are money. He didn't look stressed, he never did, but the muscle in his jaw tightened every time someone spoke behind him, and his fingers tapped a slow, deliberate rhythm against the glass. 3 beats, pause, 2 beats, pause, repeat. A pattern only he understood. He was the architect of this room, the one who assembled the team, the one who promised his investors that this vault, designed by a rogue collective known only as the Fracture, could be cracked in 72 hours. That was 6 days ago. The investors weren't the patient type. They weren't the forgiving type either. They were the kind of people who viewed failure as a character flaw, and character flaws as grounds for permanent removal. Jae-rin had built his empire on promises kept, on problems solved, on being the man who always found a way. But this vault was different. This vault was personal. Behind him, voices rose and fell in cycles of panic and exhaustion. The team had fractured over the past week. Accusations flew. Theories collapsed. Tempers shortened to the length of lit fuses. "It's not cracking," someone muttered. A woman in her 30s, dark circles under her eyes like bruises. Hair, pulled back so tight it looked painful. Dr. Hwanseong, former MIT cryptographer, published author, conference speaker. She had a wall of credentials that would intimidate most hiring committees. But right now, she stared at the screen in front of her like it had personally betrayed her, like it had called her a fraud in front of everyone who ever believed in her. "It's mocking us," another voice added. This one belonged to a younger man, mid-20s, hoodie stained with energy drink spills and what might have been ramen broth. Lee Tae-jun, hacker, genius, burnout. He had broken into 3 government databases by age 17. Served 2 years in juvenile detention. Got recruited by Jae-rin the day he was released. He leaned back in his chair and laughed, a dry, hollow sound that made everyone in the room flinch. "That's impossible," Seo snapped. Her voice had an edge now, sharp, defensive. "We tried everything." Tae-jun turned his head slowly toward her. His eyes were bloodshot. He hadn't slept in 40 hours. "Everything we know." Silence. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Jae-rin didn't turn from the window, but his fingers stopped tapping. That was how you knew he was listening. When he went still. 7 days, someone else said. The voice came from the far corner of the room. Older, rougher, textured with cigarettes and bad decisions. Park Dong-hyun, former military intelligence. The kind of man who didn't speak unless he had something heavy to say. He stood with his arms crossed, shoulders tense, watching everyone like he was calculating which person would break first. And nothing to show for it. It changes the moment we touch it, Seo said quietly. Her voice had lost its edge now. She sounded tired, defeated. The kind of tired that comes from running into the same wall over and over until your bones ache. Every sequence we input, every framework we apply, it shifts. Like it's rewriting itself in real time. Like it knows what we're about to try before we try it. Taejun laughed again, softer this time. More bitter. Maybe it's sentient. Maybe we're all screwed. Maybe the fracture built something that actually thinks, and we're just insects trying to open a door we can't even see. Shut up, Dong-hyun growled. Taejun didn't shut up. I'm serious. What if this thing is designed to be unsolvable? What if the whole point is to watch us tear ourselves apart trying? What if opening it was never the point? What if we're the experiment? No one answered, because deep down, in the part of their minds they didn't like to visit, they were all thinking the same thing. What if he was right? The vault sat in the center of the room like a black hole, absorbing light, absorbing hope, absorbing the future of everyone trapped in its orbit. Jae-rin finally turned from the window. His expression was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that makes people nervous because it suggests something cold and calculated happening beneath the surface. Something final. If this doesn't open tonight, he began. Finish that sentence, Seo interrupted. Her voice trembled, just slightly, but enough. Enough that everyone heard the fear underneath, the knowledge of what failure meant. Jae-rin's eyes met hers, cold, unblinking, the kind of eyes that had watched empires rise and fall without blinking. We don't leave this building alive. No one laughed. No one argued. Because everyone in that room knew he wasn't exaggerating. The vault wasn't just a puzzle. It was a contract, a promise, a loaded gun pressed against the temple of everyone who touched it. The investors who funded this project weren't the kind of people you disappointed. They weren't the kind of people you walked away from. They were ghosts with bank accounts, shadows with leverage, phantoms who could make entire families disappear without leaving a trace. And if this vault didn't open by sunrise, Jae-rin, and everyone in this room would become liabilities. And liabilities don't get retirement packages. The silence stretched like a wire pulled tight, ready to snap. Taejun stared at his screen. Seo's hands trembled over her keyboard. Dong-hyun's jaw clenched. The others, 3 more specialists whose names didn't matter anymore because expertise without results is just noise, sat frozen in their chairs like statues built from exhaustion and dread. The rain hammered against the windows. Relentless. Indifferent. And then, a knock at the door. Everyone froze. It was a small sound, polite, almost apologetic. But in that room, at that moment, it felt like an explosion. Taejun sat up straight, his chair creaking. Seo turned toward the sound, her face pale. Dong-hyun's hand moved instinctively toward his hip, even though he wasn't armed. Old habits. Military habits. Jae-rin didn't move. He just stared at the door like he could see through it, like he already knew what was on the other side. Delivery at the door. Came a muffled voice from the other side. Young. Female. Hesitant. The kind of voice that apologizes for existing. Taejun blinked. Then blinked again. Now? Seriously? Seo frowned. No one ordered anything. Dong-hyun stood up slowly. His chair scraped against the floor. How did someone even get up here? This floor is locked down. Card access only. Security on every entrance. No one gets past the 35th floor without clearance. No one had an answer. Jae-rin tilted his head slightly. His expression didn't change. Let her in. Everyone turned to look at him. Sir? Dong-hyun asked. His tone suggested he thought he'd misheard. Jae-rin's voice was quiet, firm. The kind of voice that doesn't repeat itself. Now. Dong-hyun hesitated for half a second, then moved toward the door. He unlocked it. 3 separate locks, electronic, mechanical, biometric, opened it, and there she was, a girl, early 20s, maybe younger. Hard to tell. Wet hair plastered to her forehead, cheap raincoat dripping onto the polished floor, forming a small puddle at her feet. She held 2 plastic bags filled with noodle containers, the kind you get from corner stores that don't ask questions and don't remember. Faces. Her eyes were wide, nervous, like a deer caught in headlights, like she didn't belong there, because she didn't. Hello, she stammered. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. I have noodles for this floor. Tae-jun snorted. Perfect. Dinner while we fail. Maybe we should order champagne next. Really celebrate our incompetence. No one else spoke. The girl shifted her weight from one foot to the other. The bags crinkled in her hands. She looked down at the floor, at the puddle forming around her shoes, at anything except the people staring at her. I'll just leave it here and go, she said quietly. She set the bags down by the door. Careful, gentle, like she was afraid of making noise, of being noticed. Turned to leave. Wait. Jae-rin's voice cut through the room like a knife. The girl froze. Everyone froze. The air itself seemed to stop moving. Jae-rin took a slow step forward, then another. His shoes clicked softly against the floor. Each step measured, deliberate. His eyes never left her. Don't move, he said quietly. The girl didn't move. Her breathing quickened, just slightly, but Jae-rin noticed. He always noticed. Did you touch the keyboard? He asked. The girl blinked, confused. No. Look at me. She did, slowly, reluctantly, like looking at him might turn her to stone. Jae-rin studied her face, her posture, the way her fingers curled slightly at her sides, the faint tremble in her jaw, the rapid pulse visible in her neck. The micro-expressions that flickered across her features too fast for most people to catch. But Jae-rin wasn't most people. Did you look at the screen? He asked. The girl hesitated. Her eyes darted toward the monitors, then back to him, then nodded. Yes, I looked at the screen. Hello, lovelies. Welcome to Afro-Korean Story Vault, the hub of great stories. Subscribe to this channel for great stories uploaded daily. Let's continue. Behind Jae-rin, someone gasped. Tae-jun shot to his feet. His chair clattered, backward. No way! Min-seo turned toward her monitor. Her face went pale, then paler, like all the blood had drained from her body at once. On the screen, in bold green letters against a black background, 2 words appeared. Access granted. The vault hissed. A soft mechanical sound, like a sigh, like relief. Like something that had been holding its breath for a very long time, finally exhaling. The black surface split down the center. Slowly, deliberately. Light spilled out from the seam, cold, white, sterile light that made the room feel smaller somehow. That made everyone in it feel smaller. The vault was open. No one moved. No one breathed. No one could process what they were seeing. 7 days, 7 people. Millions of dollars in equipment and expertise. And a delivery girl opens it in 30 seconds by looking at a screen. Tae-jun's mouth hung open. Min-seo's hands shook. Dong-hyun took a step forward, then stopped, like he didn't trust his own eyes. Jae-rin turned toward the girl. His expression hadn't changed, but something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition, calculation, interest. "What did you just do?" he asked. The girl shook her head quickly, frantically. "Nothing. I swear, I didn't do anything. I just looked at the screen. I didn't touch anything. I didn't—" "Find out who she is," Jae-rin said. His voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes before storms. Dong-hyun was already moving. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed the girl's wrist. Not rough, but firm. The kind of grip that suggests resistance would be pointless. "ID," he said. The girl fumbled for her bag with her free hand, pulled out a battered wallet. Worn leather. Duct tape holding one corner together. Handed over a card. Dong-hyun scanned it with his phone. Facial recognition, background check, criminal database, social media profiles, credit history. Everything visible in seconds. Then looked at Jae-rin. Seo Ara, 23, delivery driver. Registered, address in Namsan district. Jae-rin didn't react. He just kept staring at her. "Namsan," he repeated quietly. "Basement apartments." Ara nodded. Her hands were shaking now. Visibly. Uncontrollably. Jae-rin took a step closer. Close enough that she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow. Close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something dark and expensive. Woody. Like cedar and smoke. Close enough that she could see her own reflection in his glasses. "You're lying," he said softly. Ara's breath hitched. "I'm not." "You didn't just look at the screen," Jae-rin continued. His voice was gentle now. Almost kind, which somehow made it more terrifying. "You saw something. Something we didn't see. Something none of us could see." Ara swallowed hard. "I don't know what you mean." Jae-rin smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a chess player who just realized his opponent made a brilliant move. "Yes," he said. "You do. Before we go further, comment where you're watching from, because this night connects more people than you think. And what happens next? That depends on whether genius buys freedom. Or a cage." Her name was Seo Ara. And before tonight, she was invisible. Not metaphorically, not poetically. Literally invisible to the people who mattered. To the ones in suits and glass towers. To the ones who decided who got to dream and who got to survive. To the ones who looked through people like her the way you look through glass. Acknowledging the barrier exists, but never really seeing it. She lived in a basement apartment in Namsan district. The kind of place where the ceiling leaked when it rained and the walls smelled like mold and old kimchi and decades of other people's disappointment. The kind of place where you kept your shoes on inside because the floor was always damp and you never knew what might be growing in the corners. The kind of place where hope went to die quietly, without fanfare, without anyone noticing. But Ara didn't let it die. She couldn't afford to. Her grandmother was dying, 78 years old, lungs failing, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Hospital bills piling up faster than Ara could deliver noodles or wash dishes or do whatever cheap labor the city needed that day. The doctors said she had maybe 6 months, maybe less, maybe more if she could afford the better medications. The ones not covered by basic insurance. Her younger brother Min-jun was 16. Smart. Too smart. But drifting, staying out late, hanging around the wrong people, the kind of people who promised easy money and delivered prison sentences. The kind of people who saw smart kids from poor neighborhoods as assets to be exploited. Ara watched him slipping away, watched the light in his eyes dim, watched him become the kind of person their parents wouldn't recognize. Ara was holding them together with duct tape and denial and 20-hour workdays that left her hollow-eyed and shaking. She worked 3 jobs, sometimes 4: delivery driver, dishwasher, convenience store clerk, weekend cleaning crew at an office building in Gangnam. Whatever paid cash and didn't ask questions. She slept 4 hours a night if she was lucky. She ate instant ramen cold because she didn't have time to heat it and couldn't afford to run the gas. She wore the same pair of shoes until the soles fell off, then bought another pair from a second-hand shop for 3,000 won. And she never complained. Because complaining didn't pay the rent. Complaining didn't buy medicine. Complaining didn't keep Minjun from making the same mistakes that put his friends in jail. But once, years ago, Ara had been someone different. She had been a scholarship student at Yonsei University. Computer science. Top 5% of her class. Professors called her brilliant. They used words like prodigy and exceptional and future leader in the field. Recruiters from Samsung and Naver and Kakao lined up to meet her at career fairs. They gave her their cards, told her to call when she graduated, promised her 6-figure starting salaries and fast-track management programs. She had a future, a real one. The kind people wrote about in success stories. The kind that made her grandmother cry with pride. The kind that made Minjun tell his friends his sister was going to be somebody important. Then her parents died. Car accident, drunk driver, wrong place, wrong time, wrong universe, no insurance, no savings, no backup plan, just debt. Mountains of it. Hospital bills from the 2 weeks her mother spent in intensive care before dying. Funeral costs, legal fees, outstanding loans on their tiny apartment that Ara didn't even know existed until the collectors came knocking. And overnight, Ara went from scholarship student to dropout. From future engineer to basement dweller. From someone with a name to someone no one saw. She sold her laptop, her textbooks, her dreams, used the money to pay for her mother's funeral and the first month of her grandmother's medication. And she learned how to disappear, how to become the kind of person people looked through, the kind who delivered their food and cleaned their offices and existed in the margins of their lives without ever quite registering as human. It was safer that way. Invisible people don't get hurt, they just get forgotten. But tonight, she had been seen, and that terrified her more than anything. Ara sat in a chair in the corner of the room. Hard plastic, cold, the kind of chair designed to be uncomfortable, to discourage long stays. Dong Hyun stood behind her, arms crossed. Taejun leaned against the wall, watching her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve, a problem that didn't fit any of his frameworks. Min Seo sat at her desk, running background checks on every database she could access, digging through Ara's life like an archaeologist looking for artifacts. And Jae-rin stood by the window, hands in his pockets, staring at the rain. The silence stretched. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, Min Seo spoke. Nothing, no criminal record, no flags, no connections to the fracture or any known hacking collectives, no suspicious bank transactions, no encrypted communications, no coded social media posts. She's clean. Too clean, Taejun muttered. Min Seo shot him a look. She's a delivery driver. What do you expect? A manifesto? A secret underground lair? Taejun shrugged. I expect something. She opened a vault that 7 of us couldn't crack in a week. And she did it by looking at a screen for 30 seconds. That's not luck. That's not coincidence. That's not even skill in any way I understand. That's pattern recognition, Jae-rin said quietly. Everyone turned toward him. Jae-rin didn't turn from the window. She saw a pattern we didn't see. Min Seo frowned. That's impossible. We ran every pattern analysis algorithm available. Neural networks, machine learning models, frequency analysis, geometric mapping. We mapped every possible sequence combination, every visual permutation. If there was a discernible pattern, we would have found it. No, Jae-rin said. He turned slowly to face the room. You would have found the patterns you were trained to find, the ones that fit your frameworks, your education, your assumptions, your models. He paused. But some patterns exist outside of frameworks. He walked toward Ara, each step deliberate, measured. She didn't look for a pattern, he continued. She just saw one. Because her brain works differently. Because she processes information in ways our algorithms can't replicate. Ara's hands clenched in her lap. Jae-rin stopped in front of her, looked down. You studied computer science at Yonsei, he said. It wasn't a question. Ara's head snapped up. How did you? You dropped out 3 years ago. Second year. Financial hardship. Both parents deceased in vehicular accident. Outstanding debt approximately 47 million won. You've been working low-wage jobs ever since. No degree, no references, no professional network, no future. He paused. Until tonight. Ara's jaw tightened. I didn't ask for this. No, Jae-rin agreed. You didn't, but you have it anyway. He crouched down in front of her. Eye level now. Close. Enough that she could see the calculations running behind his gaze. The wheels turning. The assessments being made. Tell me what you saw, he said softly. Ara shook her head. I don't know, I just... Yes, you do. Ara's breath came faster. Her chest tightened. She felt like the walls were closing in, like the room was shrinking. It was just... shapes, colors. They moved in a rhythm, like music, but not music. Just a pattern. I don't know how to explain it. It was like... She struggled for words. Like watching someone speak a language you don't know, but somehow understanding what they mean anyway. The sequence on the screen. It wasn't random. It looked random, but underneath there was structure. Intention. Jae-rin's eyes narrowed. A visual rhythm. Ara nodded. The colors pulsed at different intervals. But the intervals weren't consistent. They changed. But the way they changed was consistent. Like a melody that shifts key but maintains tempo. Like... Shatanjwasa stopped, looked down. I sound crazy. No, Jae-rin said. You sound like someone who sees patterns as rhythms, who sees numbers as colors, who processes information through multiple sensory channels simultaneously. Seo leaned forward. Synesthesia. Jae-rin nodded. Cross-sensory perception. He stood up, turned toward the rest of the team. She's synesthetic, he said. She doesn't just see the vault sequence. She hears it, feels it, experiences it as a complete sensory narrative, which means she can perceive patterns that exist across multiple dimensions of data simultaneously. Patterns our linear analysis tools can't detect because they process information sequentially rather than holistically. Taejun whistled low. So, she's a human decryption tool, a biological processor for problems we can't solve digitally. Jae-rin didn't respond, but his silence was answer enough. Ara's stomach dropped. She suddenly understood. She wasn't a person to them. She was a resource. A tool. Something to be used. Can I go? She asked quietly. Jae-rin looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Yes. Ara stood up. Too fast. The room tilted. She steadied herself against the chair. But, Jae-rin added, you'll hear from me again. Ara's blood ran cold. Is that a threat? She asked. Jae-rin smiled. It's a certainty. Ara was allowed to leave an hour later. No one stopped her at the door. No one followed her down the hallway. No one asked her any more questions, but she felt eyes on her the entire way out. Cameras, security guards. The building itself seemed to watch her leave. She walked out of Hwanseong Spire with her empty delivery bags and her racing heart and the overwhelming feeling that something had shifted. Something permanent. Something that couldn't be undone. The rain had stopped. The streets were slick and empty. The city was quiet in the way cities are quiet at 3 in the morning. Not peaceful, just temporarily exhausted. She took the subway home. The last train, nearly empty. She sat in the corner and stared at her reflection in the window. She looked the same, but she didn't feel the same. She kept thinking about the vault, about the way the pattern had revealed itself to her, about how natural it had felt to reach out and input the sequence, like her hands knew what to do before her brain caught up. She kept thinking about Jae-rin, about the way he looked at her, like she was a puzzle he intended to solve, like she was an investment he intended to maximize. When she reached her basement apartment, she found Min-jun asleep on the couch. The TV flickered silently. Some action movie. Explosions without sound. Her grandmother's breathing rattled from the other room. Wet. Labored. Each breath a struggle. Ara sat down on the floor, her back against the wall, her hands shaking. She had just opened a vault that no one else could open. And the man who noticed her was the kind of man who didn't forget faces, who didn't let resources go to waste. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she cried. Not quiet tears, not dignified sadness. Real crying. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and dark. The kind that shakes your whole body. The kind that sounds like breaking. She cried for her parents, for her grandmother, for Min-jun, for the future that was stolen, for the present that was unbearable, for whatever came next. She cried until there was nothing left. Then she wiped her face, stood up, checked on her grandmother, adjusted her oxygen tube, pulled the blanket higher, looked at Min-jun sleeping on the couch. So young, so vulnerable, so close to being lost completely. And she made a decision. If Jae-rin came back, if he offered her something, anything, she would take it. Because invisible people don't get choices, but people who are seen, they get opportunities. Even if those opportunities come with chains attached. The next morning, Ara woke to a knock at the door. Sharp. Precise. 3 knocks, then silence. She opened it. A man in a black suit stood there. Young, mid-20s, polite, expressionless. The kind of face that didn't hold memory, that you'd forget 5 minutes after seeing. Ms. Seo Ara? He asked. Ara nodded. He handed her an envelope. Thick, expensive paper, the kind you use for important documents. You're expected at Hwanseong Spire, 10th floor, 9 a.m., he said. Ara stared at the envelope. It's not a request, the man said. His voice was polite, but final. The kind of politeness that disguises inevitability. Then he turned and walked away, down the narrow alley, into a black car that was too expensive for this neighborhood. Gone. Ara opened the envelope. Inside was a single card. Black. Heavy. Embossed with silver text that caught the light. Kang Jae-rin, Hwanseong Spire, floor 10. 9:20 a.m. Don't be late. No explanation. No context. Just a command disguised as an invitation. Ara's hands shook. She looked at her grandmother's door. Still, closed, still rattling with labored breath. She looked at Min-jun, now awake, rubbing his eyes, asking what was going on. She thought about the hospital bills, the rent due in 8 days, the electricity bill, the debt collectors who called every other day. She thought about the vault, about the way it opened for her, about the way Jae-rin looked at her. And she thought about the choice that wasn't really a choice. I have to go somewhere, she told Min-jun. Stay with Grandma. I'll be back soon. Where are you going? He asked. Ara looked at the card in her hand. Job interview, she said. It wasn't a lie. Not exactly. At 8:47 a.m., Ara stood in front of Hwanseong Spire. The building looked different in daylight. Cleaner, sharper, more dangerous. Glass and steel reaching toward a cloudless sky. A monument to money and power and the kind of ambition that eats people alive. She took a breath, checked her reflection in the glass doors. She'd worn her cleanest clothes, jeans without visible stains, a jacket that almost fit, shoes that were only a little worn. She still looked poor. You can't hide poverty. It shows in the details, in the worn fabric, in the way you hold yourself, in the knowledge that you don't belong. But she walked in anyway. The lobby was massive. Marble floors, modern art on the walls, a fountain in the center that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. People in expensive clothes moved through the space like they owned it, like they'd been born belonging here. No one looked at her. She walked to the security desk, showed the card. The guard scanned it. His expression didn't change, just pointed toward the elevators. Floor 10, direct elevator, far right. Ara nodded, walked toward the elevators. Her reflection followed her in every glass surface, multiplied, fractured. 1,000 versions of herself, all walking toward the same uncertain future. The elevator ride to the 10th floor felt like falling, like being swallowed, like descent disguised as ascent. The doors opened. She found herself in a hallway lined with glass walls. Through them, she could see offices, conference rooms, people in suits moving with purpose and certainty, making decisions, closing deals, building empires. At the end of the hall, a door stood open. Ara walked toward it. Each step felt heavy, final. Inside, she found Jae-rin sitting behind a desk, massive, dark wood, perfectly organized. He wasn't looking at her. He was reading something on his tablet, his face expressionless. He didn't look up when she entered. The silence stretched. Ara stood there, waiting, feeling foolish, feeling small. Finally, Jae-rin set the tablet down, looked at her. "Sit," he said. Ara sat. The chair across from him was expensive, leather, comfortable. It felt wrong, like she was contaminating it just by being there. Jae-rin studied her for a moment. His eyes moved over her face, assessing, cataloging, reading things she didn't know were visible. "You're wondering why you're here," he said. Ara nodded. "You're here because you have a gift," Jae-rin continued. "And gifts like yours don't go unnoticed. Not in my world." Ara swallowed. "I don't want to be noticed." Jae-rin smiled, small, knowing. Too late. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, fingers steepled, a position of focus and control. "I'm offering you a position," he said. "Consultant, full-time, exclusive. You'll work with my team. Your job will be to look at things we can't solve, patterns we can't see, problems we can't crack, systems that refuse to yield to conventional analysis." He paused. "And you'll be compensated very well." Ara's heart pounded. "How well?" Jae-rin named a number. Ara's breath caught. It was more than she made in a year, more than she made in 3 years. It was enough to pay off her parents' debt, enough to cover her grandmother's medical care for the next 2 years, enough to get Min-jun into a better school, maybe even college eventually. It was enough to stop drowning. "You'll also receive medical coverage for your grandmother," Jae-rin added. "Full coverage, private facility, best doctors in the city, and housing. Something better than a basement. Considerably better." Ara stared at him. Her mind raced. This didn't make sense. It was too much, too generous. People like Jae-rin didn't give things away. They bought things, owned things. "Why?" she asked quietly. Jae-rin tilted his head. Why what? Why me? You could find someone with a degree, someone with credentials, someone who actually belongs in this world, someone who— I don't need credentials, Jae-rin interrupted. His voice was sharp now. Cutting. I need results. And you gave me results in 30 seconds that 7 experts couldn't give me in 7 days. He leaned back. Credentials are what you show people when you need to justify a hire. Results are what you deliver when you don't need to justify anything. He paused. So, do you accept? Ara looked down at her hands. They were trembling. She pressed them together, tried to still them. She thought about her grandmother, the way she struggled for each breath, the way the doctors looked at Ara with pity when she asked about payment plans for treatments they both knew she couldn't afford. She thought about Min-jun, the way his eyes had gone dull, the way he flinched when she asked about school, the way he was slipping toward a future that ended in prison or worse. She thought about the vault, the way the pattern had revealed itself, the way her hands had moved without thinking, the way something inside her had recognized something in that chaos of light and color. She thought about 3 years of being invisible, 3 years of disappearing, 3 years of surviving instead of living. What if I say no? She asked. Jae-rin's smile didn't falter. If anything, it widened slightly, like he'd been expecting the question, like he'd already prepared his answer days ago. Then you walk out of this building, he said, and you never hear from me again. You go back to delivering noodles, back to your basement, back to watching your grandmother die slowly because you can't afford the medications that might give her another year. Back to watching your brother make the same mistakes that destroyed the lives of everyone he calls friend. He leaned forward again. His voice dropped, became quieter, more dangerous. But, he continued, you'll always wonder. What if? What if you had taken the chance? What if you had saved your grandmother? What if you had given your brother a future? What if you had become something more than invisible? He paused. Let the words sink in. What if you had stopped pretending that poverty is noble and survival is enough? Ara's hands clenched. Her nails dug into her palms. And one more thing, Jae-rin said, even softer now, almost gentle. The people who built that vault, the fracture, they know it was opened. And they know someone with your specific skill set exists, which means they'll come looking. They're very good at finding people. Very thorough. Very persistent. Ara's blood ran cold. And when they do, Jae-rin continued, you'll want someone like me between you and them. Someone with resources, protection, the kind of influence that keeps dangerous people at a distance. He smiled. I can be that someone. Or I can be a stranger you met once. Your choice. The room felt smaller suddenly, like the walls had moved closer while she wasn't looking. Ara understood now. This wasn't an offer. It was a trap that looked like salvation. A cage disguised as opportunity. But what choice did she have? What choice had she ever had? She closed her eyes, took a breath, opened them. Yes, she whispered. Jae-rin's smile widened. Good. Welcome to Hwanseong. He pressed a button on his desk. The door opened. A woman entered, mid-40s, efficient, carrying a folder. This is Ms. Park, Jae-rin said. She'll handle your paperwork, contract, non-disclosure agreement, security clearance, medical forms for your grandmother, housing arrangements. You'll start tomorrow. Ara stood. Her legs felt weak, unsteady. One more thing, Jae-rin said. Ara turned back. That vault you opened? Jae-rin's eyes locked onto hers. That was a test. By the fracture. They wanted to see if anyone could solve it. You did. Which means you passed their test. Which means they're interested in you now. He paused. Consider that both a compliment and a warning. Ara's stomach dropped. "What do they want?" she asked. Jae-rin smiled. "That's what we're going to find out." Ara left his office 30 minutes later with a contract. A key, card, a phone, new, expensive, encrypted, and a phone number she was told to memorize and then destroy. She walked through the glass halls in a daze. Everything felt surreal, like a dream, like someone else's life. Ms. Park walked beside her, explaining procedures, security protocols, work schedules. Her voice was steady, professional, like this was all perfectly normal. "Your grandmother will be transferred to Seongmo Private Care tomorrow morning," Ms. Park said. "Top-tier facility, full-time nursing staff, pulmonary specialists, physical therapy, nutritionist, whatever she needs." Ara nodded. She couldn't speak. If she spoke, she might cry. "Your brother will be enrolled at Hwanseong International School," Ms. Park continued. "Scholarship, full ride, tuition, books, uniforms, everything covered. They have excellent university placement rates." Ara's vision blurred. She blinked rapidly. "And your apartment," Ms. Park said. "Floor 32, furnished. 1 bedroom for you, 1 for your brother, guest room for when your grandmother visits. Move-in ready. Here's your key." She handed Ara another card. This one's silver. Heavy. "Security will help you move your belongings tomorrow afternoon," Ms. Park said. "Just bring what you want to keep. Everything else will be provided." They reached the elevator. Ms. Park pressed the button. "Any questions?" she asked. Ara had 1,000 questions, but none that could be answered. Not really. "No," she said quietly. Ms. Park smiled, professionally. "Welcome to Hwanseong, Ms. Seo." The elevator doors opened. Ara stepped inside, turned around. Ms. Park was already walking away. Back to her office. Back to her next task. The doors closed. Ara was alone. She looked at her reflection in the polished metal. She looked the same, but everything had changed. She pressed her back against the wall, slid down, sat on the floor of the elevator as it descended, and let herself break. For 60 seconds, that was all she allowed herself, because tomorrow she would wake up in a new apartment, with a new job, with a new life, and she would be whatever Kang Jae-rin needed her to be. Because she didn't have a choice, not anymore. The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened. Ara stood, wiped her face, smoothed her clothes, walked out into the lobby, through the glass doors, into the sunlight. She took out her old phone, called Min Jun. "We're moving," she said when he answered. "Pack everything. We're leaving the basement." "What? Why? What happened?" "I got a job," Ara said. "A real one." She could hear the confusion in his voice, the disbelief. "Doing what?" Ara looked up at Hwanseong Spire. It stretched toward the sky. Glass and steel and secrets. "I'm not sure yet," she said. "But it pays well." That night, Ara told her grandmother the good news. She watched the old woman's face light up, watched tears stream down wrinkled cheeks, watched hope return to eyes that had forgotten what hope looked like. She told Min Jun about the school, watched him try to act cool, watched him fail, watched him smile, really smile, for the first time in months. And she sat in their basement apartment one last time, in the dark, listening to the sounds of the building, the dripping pipes, the rats in the walls, the arguments from upstairs, the crying baby next door. Sounds she wouldn't miss, but sounds that were familiar. Safe. Known. Tomorrow, everything would be different. Tomorrow, she would step into a world she didn't understand. Tomorrow, she would become someone she wasn't sure she wanted to be. But tonight, just for tonight, she let herself feel relief. 1 week later, Ara stood in front of Hwanseong Spire at 8:45 a.m. But this time, she didn't hesitate. She wore new clothes, Nothing. Fancy. But clean. Proper. Clothes that didn't announce poverty the moment you saw them. Her hair was clean. Styled. She'd slept 6 hours. Eaten breakfast. She looked different. She felt different. She walked through the glass doors, past the security guards who now nodded at her, who knew her face, who scanned her keycard without question, into the elevator, up to the 10th floor. She had spent the week settling in, moving her grandmother to Seongmo private care. She'd visited twice, watched the doctors examine her, watched them adjust her medications, watched color return to her grandmother's face, watched her breathe easier. She'd helped Min-jun move into their new apartment, watched him explore the space with wide eyes, watched him stand at the window looking out at the city, watched him realize that maybe the future wasn't just something rich kids got to have. And she'd read the contract. Every page, every clause, every word. It was binding, exclusive, indefinite. She couldn't work for anyone else. Couldn't discuss her work with anyone. Couldn't leave without Jae-rin's approval. She'd signed it anyway, because the cage came with medicine for her grandmother and hope for her brother. And that was more than she'd had before. She stepped into Jae-rin's office. He was waiting. Standing by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city. "Ready?" he asked without turning around. Ara nodded. "Yes." Jae-rin turned to face her, studied her for a moment, then gestured toward the window. "Come here," he said. Ara walked over, stood beside him. Together they looked out at the city, the buildings, the streets, the people moving like ants far below, the Han River snaking through it all like a silver thread. The rain had returned. It always did in Miryang City. Light rain, soft, almost gentle. "You stopped being invisible last night," Jae-rin said quietly. "The night you opened the vault." Ara didn't respond. She just watched the rain blur the city below. Jae-rin turned to look at her. His expression was unreadable. "And once someone like me sees you," he continued, "there's no going back. You understand that, don't you?" Ara met his gaze. She saw the calculation there, the cold certainty, the knowing, the power. But she also saw something else, something she hadn't noticed before. Curiosity. He wasn't just using her. He was genuinely interested in what she could do, what she could become. Whether that made things better or worse, she didn't know. "I understand," she said. Jae-rin smiled. "Good." He walked back to his desk, picked up a folder. Black, thick, sealed with red tape. "Because your first real assignment starts now," he said. He handed her the folder. Ara opened it. Inside were blueprints, complex code sequences, photographs of people she didn't recognize, technical diagrams that made her head spin, security schematics, encrypted communications logs, and at the top of the first page, a single line in bold text. "The Fracture has contacted us. They want to meet the girl who opened their vault." Ara's hands started to shake. She tried to steady them. Failed. Jae-rin noticed. Of course he noticed. "Scared?" he asked. Ara closed the folder, looked at him, decided to be honest. "Terrified," she said. Jae-rin's smile widened. "Perfect," he said. "Fear keeps you sharp. Fear keeps you alive. Fear is what separates people who survive from people who don't." He walked around his desk, leaned against it, crossed his arms. "The Fracture is a collective of the most dangerous minds in the underground," he explained. "Hackers, cryptographers, engineers, anarchists. They build impossible systems for impossible clients. Governments, corporations, criminal syndicates, anyone willing to pay their price." "What do they want with me?" Ara asked. "They want to test you," Jae-rin said. They want to know if you're real, if your ability is genuine, if you can be useful to them. And what do you want? Jae-rin's eyes locked onto hers. I want to know what they're planning. I want access to their network. I want leverage over people who've spent years being unleverageable. He paused. And you're going to get it for me. Ara's stomach dropped. You want me to spy on them? I want you to be exactly what they think you are, Jae-rin corrected. A girl with an extraordinary gift. A girl who opened their vault. A girl they're curious about. He smiled. Everything else comes naturally from there. Ara stared at the folder in her hands, at the photographs, at the diagrams, at the evidence of a world she'd never known existed. What if I can't do it? She asked quietly. Jae-rin pushed off the desk, walked toward her, stopped close. Too close. You can, he said, because you have something they've never encountered before. Something they can't replicate or predict or control. You see patterns they don't even know exist. He paused. That makes you valuable. That makes you dangerous. That makes you mine. The last word hung in the air like a brand. Ara met his gaze, didn't look away. When do I meet them? She asked. Jae-rin smiled. Tonight. Ara spent the rest of the day preparing, or trying to. Mostly she just read the folder over and over, memorizing faces, studying patterns, trying to understand what she was walking into. Jae-rin had assigned her a handler, a woman named Kim So-young, late 30s, former intelligence operative, cold eyes, efficient movements. She briefed Ara on security protocols, emergency contacts, what to say, what not to say, how to behave. Don't try to be clever, So-young said. Don't try to impress them, just be yourself. Be the girl who saw something they couldn't see. That's all they want to meet. What if they realize I'm working with Jae-rin? Ara asked. So-young's expression didn't change. They already know. The fracture knows everything. They just want to see if you know, if you're honest about it. She paused. Be honest. Selectively honest. That's the key. At 7:00 p.m., a car picked up Ara from Hwanseong Spire. Black, tinted windows, driver who didn't speak. She sat in the back, watched the city slide past. The lights, the people, the normal world where normal people lived normal lives. A world she was leaving further behind with every mile. The car drove for 40 minutes, out of the city center, into industrial areas, warehouses, empty lots. The kind of places where cameras don't work and people don't ask questions. Finally, it stopped. End of the line, the driver said. His first words. Ara got out. She stood in front of an abandoned factory. Or what looked abandoned. Broken windows, rusted metal, graffiti covering every surface. But the door was new, steel, electronic lock. As she approached, it opened. A figure stood in the doorway. Backlit. Features obscured. Seo Ara, a voice said. Gender neutral. Digitally altered. Welcome, we've been expecting you. Ara's heart pounded, but she stepped forward. Into the darkness. Into the unknown. Into whatever came next. The door closed behind her, and for the second time in a week, Ara disappeared. But this time, it wasn't because no one saw her. It was because she chose to vanish into shadows where only the most dangerous people live. Outside, the rain started again. Harder now, hammering against metal and concrete. Inside Hwanseong Spire, Jae-rin stood at his window, watching the storm. A tablet in his hand showing a blinking red dot moving through the industrial district. Ara's location, tracked, monitored, recorded. He smiled. Let's see what you're really capable of, he whispered to the empty room. And somewhere in the darkness, in a factory that didn't officially exist. Ara stood in a room full of strangers who knew more about her than she'd ever know about them. "Show us," one of them said. "Show us how you think." And Ara realized that opening the vault wasn't the test. This was the test. Everything before was just the audition. Now, the real performance began. Hello, lovelies. Welcome to Afro-Korean Story Vault, the hub of great stories. Subscribe now, because the next part answers one question only. Does genius buy freedom or a cage? And trust me, what happens in that factory will change everything you think you know about this story. Ara walked into the darkness. But what walks out? That's a different question entirely. Hit that subscribe button, because this is just the beginning, and beginnings are always the safest part. What comes next? That's when people start disappearing for real.